صلوات الله محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على كل الأنبياء والمرسلين لا سيما أبا القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله وصحبه الأخيار المنتجبين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
قال الله تعالى في كتاب المجيد: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض وما بث فيهما من دابة وهو على جمعهم إذا يشاء قدير. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Please send the salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد.
So the topic of today's discussion will be a topic that has occupied the minds of people throughout the decades, centuries, and that is there any life in the outer space? That is the topic. So, according to the science, we haven't reached any conclusion, but most probably the scientists say that there is life in outer space, in the universe, in the wide universe with its estimated 400 billion galaxies. Just the small Milky Way of ours is nothing compared to all of those galaxies. If you would gather all the galaxies of the universe, it would become more than the sands of all beaches and deserts on our earth. So most probably the scientists, they say that life exists. So I did a small research. What does the Qu'ran say? What does the narrations of the Prophet, your Ahlul Bayt, what do they say? And what does the Ulama say about life in outer space? I quoted a verse from the Noble Quran. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَثَّ فِيهِمَا مِنْ دَابَّةٍ وَهُوَ عَلَى جَمْعِهِمْ إِذَا يَشَاءُ قَدِيرٌ. And of His signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and what He has dispersed throughout them of creatures. Dabba. Another translation says this. What does the other translation say? And among His signs is the creation, and of His signs is the creation of the heavens and earth, and what He has dispersed throughout them of creatures. But Allama Tabatabai, when he comes to this verse and the interpretation of this verse, let us look at what he says here. He says that this verse makes it very clear that we have life in outer space when it comes to the word dabba. But then you have those who say, look, why are you saying that it is referred to life in other planets, in other galaxies? Why don't you say that sama here and everything that is dispersed throughout the heavens is referred to the angels? Why don't you say that? Why don't you say that the Quran is just mentioning the birds, the animals in the skies? Why do you say other life in other planets and other creatures in other planets? Why, Allama Tabatabai? Allama Tabatabai, he comes back and says, look, if the word dabba is referring to a creature which has motion, which is physical. And we talked about angels, didn't we? We said that angels are non-physical realities. We said that angels do not have haraka, they do not have motion. That means they do not have feelings. Dabba here is a physical creature, and Allama is mentioning that. Then that must be in other planets. The verse is not referring to the angels. He says that, I'm quoting, the appearance of the verse is that in the heavens there are creatures, dabba, like on earth. And if someone says that these creatures in the heavens, outer space, are angels, it is rejected because the word dabba does not apply to the angels. And we need to know the discussion of angels and the reality of angels and what it means. Because that is what Ulama is referring to. Then you will need to refer to the topic of angels. That is not the discussion here. So why is that? Why can't it be the angels? And then he says that they have physical movement. Dabba is referring to a creature which has physical movement. And thus that cannot be the angels. It cannot be the animals. What does a person who is not that fond of irfan, is not that fond of philosophy, what does that person say? Let us look at what Ayatollah Makarim Shirazi says about this verse. He says that the word dabba includes, I'm quoting, microscopic creatures to giant animals and etc. And then he says, and this verse implies the existence of all kinds of living beings in the heavens. Although the scientists have not yet made a definite judgment about this, but it is said that among the constellations of the sky, there are probably many stars or planets that have living beings, and the Quran explicitly states the fact that there are many living creatures in the sky. This is what Shaykh Makarim says. You want more? Should I give you more? What about Ayatollah Nuri Hamadani, another grand Ayatollah, which is also not that fond of Islamic philosophy? You know, don't go and discuss Islamic philosophy with these people. They don't like it. But look at what Ayatollah Nuri Hamadani says when it comes to this verse. He says, I'm quoting, interestingly, the Quran explicitly states this important issue about 14 centuries ago. 14 centuries ago. Then he refers to the above verse that we mentioned, and then he says there are living beings in the heavens like the earth. The inhabitants of the heavens and the earth will meet whenever Allah's will requires it. So he's referring to technology here. He's referring to if we one day have that technological means so that we can have a connection, a link, and interact with each other, with the creatures outside, or what Imam Ali says, Adams from outer space, then we were able to communicate with them. But let us look now, I just mentioned 4 grand ayatollahs. Let us look at the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt. What do they say in this regard? The Ahlul Bayt, starting with Imam Muhammadul Baqir alayhi salam. Can you send a salawat for his spirit? So look at what Baqirul Ulum says to Jabir ibn Yazid, one of the companions of the Imam. He says that it is as if you think, O Jabir, that Allah only created this world and nothing else. And you also imagine that Allah did not create a human being other than you. Yes, by Allah. Allah created 1,000 words and 1,000 people, and you are the last, the lowest of them all, of these words and of these people. We are the lowest. Ad-dunya, what does dunya mean for you who are Arab speakers? What does dunya mean? You Arab speakers. Exactly. That which is the lowest. He says this dunya is the lowest. And we, the people, are the lowest of them. You know what that means? Do you know what that means? I'm going to come to that. You digest that first. So with the last Imam, what the Imam is referring to with the last, he means the lowest of all words. Thus, we are the lowest of those creatures, and they are on a higher level than us. A person asked Imam Ali alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, please send a salawat. He asked Amir al-Mu'mineen 3 times, Ya Ali, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, what existed before Adam? What existed before the human being on this earth? The Imam responds, another Adam, another human being.
What about the dinosaurs?
He says before that, the question and answers, we'll take it later inshallah. That's good, I love passion, I love passion. So,
Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. What existed before that Adam, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? He said, another Adam. And he said, what before that? Another Adam. If that person would have asked the Imam 1,000 times, the Imam would have answered another Adam. And then he says that, Imam Ali, he says that Allah has created 1,000 words and 100,000 Adams, and you are in the last of these words, and the last of the humans in these series. So before us, you have the fossils, right? You have the fossils of human-like, not the Homo sapiens that we are, but you had other species of human beings, don't we? The Homo sapiens that we are referring to, the offspring of Adam alayhi salam that we are referring to, according to the narrations, is not born between 7 to 10,000 years. But the science, with the fossils that we have explored and discovered, the fossils tell us that there was other kind of human-like creatures on this earth, more than 10,000 years. This is what Imam Ali is referring to 14 centuries ago. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that you may think, he says that to his companion, you may think that Allah did not create any human being other than you. No, it is not so. But He created 1,000 people prior to you, of whom you are the last generation. So if you imagine that after us maybe another kind of species would come up, according to the Imam, that is wrong. We are the last of these generations. So after us, you know what comes? Judgment Day. Yawm al-Qiyamah. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam says, from the day he created the earth, Allah created and then exterminated 7 words, none of which were of the descendants of Adam. He created, exterminated, and none of them were the descendants of Adam. It wasn't of Adam's offspring, us. And none of them were of the descendants of Adam, Abu Bashar. Allah created them all from the earth. This same mineral, this same clay, teen, as the Quran says, the same mineral that you are built by, your physical you. And then he says that Allah created them all from the earth and created another generation after another. And for each one He created a word after another. So that in the end He created Abu Bashar, in the end of these species. Abu Bashar was created and separated his descendants from others. Now you have that theory about, alright, what about the children of Adam, who did they marry? For example, you have that question, right? Where Sheikh Makarim Shirazi says, but look at this. Don't science say that we have other species? They could have married them. They were human-like, right? Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq continues. He says, beyond this son of yours are 40 other sons, beyond which exist many other creatures. How do you deal with these narrations? You tell me. And these are narrations that people usually don't discuss. Have you heard this before? People usually don't discuss these narrations. And beyond this moon of yours are 40 other moons, which many creatures live. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, these stars in the sky are cities or settlements. He's referring to the planets. Like the cities of the earth, each of which is joined by a pillar of light with other cities. I'm jumping over the Arabic. We don't have much time. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq continues. He says, for Allah Almighty are 12,000 universes. How many? 12,000 universes. Each of which is greater than the 7 heavens and the 7 earths. None of the inhabitants of these words see for Allah a word other than their own. They think they're the only ones, like the human beings here, right? They don't see anything else, any other word than theirs, a word than their own. And I, the Imam is saying, and I am the Imam for whom? I am the authority, the Hujjah for all these words. Very strong statement. That's a very strong statement. Jabir, a companion of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, he says, outside the sun of yours, there are 40 springs of sun. Each sun is 40 days away from the other sun. There are many creatures in it who do not know. I need your attention here. Who do not know whether Allah created man or not. And outside of this moon of yours, you have 40 other moons, which takes a journey of 40 days between one moon and the next. And in it are many creatures who do not know whether Allah created man or not. Now, don't get yourself fixed up on the days. These days could be the speed of light. Okay, if it's light days, then we're talking about many years, right? So the Imam has to speak with the people at their intellectual capacity at his time, right? If he would be today among us, he would have spoken in another way. So the discussion of the existence of other worldly beings in the narration, the Ahlul Bayt has expressed them in a certain language according to the intellectual capacity of theirs. So one reason is the lack of information. People did not have that much information. That is why the Imams were required to speak in that way. They were required to speak in that way. The other reason is that the educational purpose of it. The Imam spoke and gave the principles, the main principles, but the details are for us. So the door of ijtihad is not closed. The door of intellectual struggle is not closed. You, me, we have to go after those details. The principle has been given. Alright? So those were the reasons why the Imam spoke in that certain way. But if I go back to one of the narrations, now they made it very clear, the ulama and the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt, that we are not alone. The question that has occupied the mind of mankind for so many decades and centuries has been answered by those who are linked to revelation, wahy. Alright? Now, in one of the narrations, didn't the Imam say that we are the lowest, they're on higher levels? You know what that means? And the Imam says that these people, by the way, they don't know what Satan is. They don't know what Iblis is. You know what that means? They were prophet-like. كَأَنَّهُمْ مِنَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. Now imagine that you have Salmans everywhere. You know the companion Salman, right? One of the closest companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What was it? Salman min Ahlul Bayt, right? The spiritual level that Salman was on, very few of us reach that level. Now imagine that all people are like Salman, like Abu Dharr. would you sin? Would something called sin exist on that planet? They don't know what Iblis is. Do they need hidayah? Another question. Do they need hidayah? Do they need hujjah? Do they need prophets? The answer is yes. They need prophets, but what is their prophet for? They're not sinning. They're shibh al-ma'soom. In a vertical line, you could call them ma'soom, infallible, from sins, from error. So what are the prophets for? بَيْنَ الْخَيْرِ وَأَخْيَارِ. They choose between what is good and what is best. Your spiritual level is very good, but we want to take you even higher. That is the difference. Okay? But you might turn around and ask me, didn't you say that Khalifatullah ala al-ard, or fil ard, is who? Al-insan. And the insan that we are referring to now is us, right? So how come that they are better than us? How come that they are better than us then? The Khalifatullah that the Quran is mentioning, and which is among our species, yes, is Al-Insan Al-Kamil, the perfect human being from all dimensions. That is the person that the Quran is mentioning. And yes, they are better than those people in other planets. They are the Khalifatullah, right? The vicegerent of Allah, the steward of Allah on earth. So these people, this selected few among mankind, they are better. But when we look a holistic view, and we look at the majority of the human beings, no, these creatures are better than us. Alright, my time is out, and we will leave a couple of minutes for questions and answers, inshallah ta'ala. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.